The stagecoach rattled into Independence, Missouri on a suffocating July afternoon in 1872, carrying its usual cargo of dust-covered travelers and one peculiar passenger who sat rigid as a corpse behind a thick mourning veil that concealed every feature of her face. Willa Spencer pressed her gloved hands together in her lap as the coach lurched to a stop outside the general store, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Through the black fabric that shrouded her, she could make out the blurred shapes of townspeople gathering, their curious whispers rising like steam. She had known this moment would come, had dreaded it through every mile of the journey from St. Louis, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of their stares. The driver's boots hit the ground with a thud, and then his weathered face appeared at the window. "End of the line, miss. Your intended should be waiting." Intended. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. Willa had never met Jeremiah Potter, had only exchanged 3 brief letters arranged by the matrimonial agency that promised lonely men and desperate women a chance at respectability. She knew he was a shopkeeper, 42 years old, and in need of a wife to help run his establishment. What he knew of her was mostly lies. "Thank you," she managed, her voice muffled by the veil. The driver opened the door and offered his hand, but Willa saw how his eyes shifted away from her shrouded form, how his jaw tightened with something between pity and discomfort. She had grown accustomed to such reactions over the past year. The veil had become both her shield and her prison. As her boots touched the dusty street, Willa heard the whispers intensify. A woman's voice, sharp with judgment, cut through the murmur. "Is that her? The mail-order bride? Why's she all covered up like that? Must be hideously scarred," another woman replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "I heard Jeremiah was desperate, but this is something else entirely." Willa's fingers trembled as she reached for her small trunk, but the driver had already hauled it down. She stood alone in the middle of the street, surrounded by strangers who stared at her like she was a carnival curiosity, and waited for the man who had agreed to marry her sight unseen. The crowd parted, and a thin man in a pressed suit approached. Jeremiah Potter had a neat mustache and calculating eyes that swept over her veiled form with unconcealed dismay. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be polite but far enough to suggest his reluctance. "Miss Spencer," he said, his voice clipped and cold. "I am Jeremiah Potter." "Mr. Potter." Willa extended her hand, but he did not take it. "Perhaps we should speak inside," he said, gesturing toward the general store behind him. His tone suggested this was not a kindness but a desire to remove the spectacle from public view. Before Willa could respond, Jeremiah's eyes fixed on something over her shoulder, and his expression shifted from discomfort to alarm. A man on horseback was approaching, moving with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this land in a way that could never be taught. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, and Willa found herself staring at a figure that seemed pulled straight from the wild stories she had read as a girl. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn denim and a leather vest over a dark shirt. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes took in everything with a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. A Colt revolver sat low on his hip, and dust caked his boots from hard riding. "Beckett Irving," Jeremiah said, and there was an edge to his voice. "This does not concern you." The cowboy ignored him, his attention fixed on Willa with an intensity that made her breath catch. He stepped closer, and she noticed things she should not have been able to see through the veil. The scar that ran along his left temple, the slight curl of dark hair at his collar, the way his hands rested near his belt, relaxed but ready. "That your bride, Potter?" Beckett's voice was low and rough like gravel underfoot. "That is my business," Jeremiah snapped. "Now if you will excuse us—" "Funny thing," Beckett interrupted, his eyes never leaving Willa. "I just came from Doc Morrison's place. He mentioned you were supposed to pick up medicine for your mother last week. Said she's been poorly." Jeremiah's face flushed. "I have been busy with preparations. Too busy to tend to your sick mother, but not too busy to order up a wife." Beckett's voice held no judgment, only curiosity, but Willa saw how Jeremiah bristled at the implication. "My affairs are none of your concern, Irving." "Maybe not." Beckett took another step closer to Willa, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something wild that had no name. "But I am making them my concern right now." The crowd had gone silent, watching the exchange with hungry eyes. Willa felt the tension coiling in the air like a spring wound too tight. She had traveled 800 miles to escape one nightmare, and now she stood between two men she did not know, feeling like a prize to be claimed rather than a person with any say in her own fate. "Excuse me," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I am standing right here." Both men turned to look at her, but it was Beckett who spoke. "You are, and I am wondering if you know what you are walking into." "I know I answered an advertisement," Willa said carefully. "I know Mr. Potter and I have an arrangement. An arrangement." Beckett tilted his head slightly, and even through the veil, Willa felt the weight of his scrutiny. "That what you want? An arrangement?" The question lodged somewhere in her chest, heavy and uncomfortable. Want had nothing to do with her situation. Want was a luxury for women with choices, and Willa had exhausted her choices a year ago when the factory fire had left half her face scarred beyond recognition. No man in St. Louis would have her. No respectable work would hire someone who frightened customers. The matrimonial agency had been her last hope, and even they had struggled to find a match until Jeremiah Potter's letter had arrived, stating plainly that he needed a wife who could work and would not expect affection or romance. "What I want," Willa said slowly, "is none of your concern, Mr. Irving." Something flickered in Beckett's expression, something that might have been disappointment or respect or both. He nodded slowly, then turned his attention back to Jeremiah. "Your mother needs that medicine today, Potter. Doc says another few days without it and she might not pull through." Jeremiah's face went pale, then red with fury. "You have no right, I am making it my right." Beckett's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "You go tend to your mother. I will see that Miss Spencer gets settled proper." "Absolutely not," Jeremiah sputtered. "She is my intended bride, and I will not have you—" "You will not have me what?" Beckett asked, and now there was something dangerous in his tone. "Show basic human decency to a woman who just traveled across half the state. Your mother is dying, Potter. Go be a son before you try to be a husband." The two men stared at each other, and Willa realized she was holding her breath. Around them, the townspeople watched with avid interest, this drama infinitely more entertaining than their usual afternoon concerns. Finally, Jeremiah looked away first. "Fine. But Miss Spencer will wait at the hotel, properly chaperoned." "I will not have her reputation compromised by your interference." "Her reputation," Beckett repeated, and there was something like humor in his voice now. "Sure, Potter. Whatever you say." Jeremiah shot Willa one last look, his eyes cold and calculating behind his spectacles. "I will call on you this evening, Miss Spencer. We will discuss our arrangement then." He made the word sound like a business transaction, which Willa supposed it was. As Jeremiah hurried away toward the edge of town where his mother's cottage sat, the crowd began to disperse, disappointed that no violence had erupted. Willa stood alone with the cowboy, her trunk at her feet, and no idea what happened next. "Thank you," she said finally. though she was not entirely sure what she was thanking him for. Beckett picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing and settled it against his hip. "Come on. I will get you to the hotel." Mr. Potter said properly chaperoned, Willa pointed out, following him down the street. "Widow Hutchins runs the hotel. She is the most proper woman in 3 counties and meaner than a rattlesnake when crossed. That proper enough for you?" Despite everything, Willa felt a smile tug at her lips beneath the veil. "I suppose it will have to be." They walked in silence for a moment, and Willa became aware of how people tracked their progress, how conversations stopped when they passed. She had hoped Independence might be different from St. Louis, that perhaps in a frontier town where everyone had come from somewhere else, her appearance might matter less. But people were people, and curiosity was universal. "Why did you help me?" Willa asked as they approached a 2-story building with a painted sign declaring it the Independence Hotel. Beckett stopped, turning to face her fully for the first time. Through the veil, she could make out more details now. Eyes the color of creek water after a storm, a face that was more interesting than handsome, weathered by sun and wind and hard living. He studied her veiled face for a long moment before answering. "Because you looked like you needed help," he said simply. "And because Potter is the kind of man who forgets his dying mother when something more convenient comes along. Seemed to me you deserved better than that." "You do not know anything about me," Willa said softly. "Perhaps I am exactly what I deserve." Beckett's expression shifted, something almost tender crossing his features. "Maybe, but I do not think so." Before Willa could respond, the hotel door burst open and a formidable woman in a severe black dress emerged, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and her eyes sharp as flint. "Beckett Irving, what trouble are you bringing to my doorstep?" the woman demanded. "No trouble, Widow Hutchins. Just escorting Miss Spencer to her room. She is Potter's intended, just arrived on the stage." The widow's eyes swung to Willa, taking in the veil and the dusty traveling dress and the trunk in Beckett's arms. Her expression softened fractionally, which Willa suspected was the equivalent of open weeping in someone less stern. "Well, bring her in then. No sense standing in the heat." The widow stepped aside, gesturing them into the hotel's dim interior. "I heard about the excitement in the street. Whole town is buzzing about Potter running off and leaving his bride standing there like forgotten luggage." "I asked him to tend to his mother," Beckett said, setting down the trunk in the small lobby. "She needs medicine. His mother needs a son who gives a damn, but we cannot all have what we need." The widow turned to Willa. "I am Harriet Hutchins. I run this establishment and tolerate no nonsense. You will be staying in room 4, top of the stairs and to the left. Meals are served at 7, noon, and 6. You are late for noon dinner, but I will send something up." "Thank you," Willa said quietly. "I appreciate your kindness. Kindness has nothing to do with it. You paid for a room and board and I provide what is paid for. Simple as that." But there was something in the widow's eyes that suggested more compassion than her words implied. Beckett hauled the trunk up the narrow stairs, and Willa followed, acutely aware of the widow's scrutiny boring into her back. The hotel was clean but spare, smelling of lye soap and old wood. Room 4 was small, containing a narrow bed, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a single window that looked out over the main street. "Not much," Beckett said, setting the trunk at the foot of the bed. "But it is clean and the roof does not leak much. It is fine." Willa moved to the window, looking down at the street below. Independence was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of weathered buildings clustered along the dusty road, surrounded by endless prairie that stretched to the horizon. She could see the general store where Jeremiah worked, a church with a white steeple, a saloon with its swinging doors, a blacksmith shop with smoke rising from the forge. "You can still leave," Beckett said quietly from behind her. "Stage comes through again in 3 days. You could be back in St. Louis before Potter even knows you are gone." Willa turned to face him, her hands gripping the windowsill. "And go where? Do what? I have no money for fare, no prospects, no family waiting." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "The matrimonial agency made clear that I was fortunate anyone responded to my application at all." "They said that to you?" Anger flickered across Beckett's face. "Those words exactly, not exactly, but the meaning was clear enough." Willa lifted her hand to the veil, then dropped it again, the old instinct to hide still too strong. "I am damaged goods, Mr. Irving. Mr. Potter is willing to overlook that in exchange for a worker. It is more than I could hope for elsewhere." Beckett took a step closer, and Willa found herself unable to move, pinned by the intensity of his gaze. "What happened?" he asked softly. "Does it matter?" "It might." Willa considered refusing to answer, considered telling him it was none of his business and asking him to leave. But something in his voice, in the way he looked at her like she was a person rather than a problem, made her want to tell the truth. "I worked in a textile factory in St. Louis," she said, the words coming slowly at first, then faster as the story poured out. "Last summer there was a fire. The owner had locked the exits to prevent workers from taking unauthorized breaks. 23 women died. I was one of the lucky ones who made it out." "Lucky," Beckett repeated, and there was something dark in his voice. "I survived. That makes me lucky, even if I have to live like this." Willa gestured to the veil. "The burns were extensive. My face, my neck, part of my shoulder. The doctors did what they could, but—" She trailed off, remembering the horror in her landlady's eyes, the way children had screamed when they saw her, the endless rejections from every place she had sought work. "So you answered a mail-order bride advertisement," Beckett finished. "It seemed the only option." "The agency was honest about my situation. They included a letter from my doctor describing the extent of my injuries. Mr. Potter knew what he was getting. Did he?" Beckett moved closer still, close enough that Willa could see the individual flecks of gray in his eyes, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. Or did he just know he was getting someone desperate enough not to ask questions or expect anything beyond hard work and cold courtesy? The question hit too close to the truth Willa had been avoiding. She turned back to the window, her throat tight with emotions she could not name. "It does not matter what he knew or did not know. I made a commitment. I signed a contract with the agency. I gave my word." "Your word," Beckett said, and she felt him move behind her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence like heat from a fire. "That important to you?" "It is all I have left that is mine," Willa said simply. Silence filled the room, heavy and weighted with things unsaid. Finally, Beckett stepped back and Willa felt the loss of his nearness like a cold wind. "I should go," he said. "You need to rest, but Miss Spencer, if you need anything at all, you send word to the Double Bar I Ranch 5 miles north of town. That is where I work. Foreman there. The ranch hands come into town most Saturdays for supplies, and I am around fairly regular." "Why would I need anything from you?" Willa asked, turning to face him again. Beckett met her eyes through the veil, and his expression was serious. "Because something tells me Potter is not going to be the husband you are hoping for, and because every person deserves to know they have got someone they can call on if things go bad." "You do not know me," Willa said, echoing her earlier words. "No," Beckett agreed, moving toward the door. "But I would like to." He left before Willa could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs, and then she was alone in the small room with only the sound of the street below and the thundering of her own heart. True to her word, Widow Hutchins sent up a plate of cold chicken and bread with butter, along with a pitcher of water and a glass. Willa lifted her veil just enough to eat, grateful for the privacy and the food after the long journey. As she ate, she replayed the encounter in the street, the way Beckett Irving had stepped in without being asked, the way he had looked at her like the veil was irrelevant. It meant nothing, she told herself firmly. He was being kind to a stranger, nothing more. In a few hours, Jeremiah Potter would arrive to discuss their arrangement, and her new life would begin. The cowboy with the storm-colored eyes was just a momentary distraction, a brief flash of something that could never be hers. But as the afternoon light slanted through the window and the shadows lengthened across the floor, Willa found herself thinking not of Jeremiah Potter and their practical arrangement, but of Beckett Irving and the way his voice had softened when he said, "I would like to." Evening came slowly to independence, the heat of the day giving way to a slightly cooler dusk that brought out the townspeople to their porches and stoops. Willa had washed as best she could in the small basin, changed into her one good dress that was only slightly less travel-worn than the one she had arrived in, and waited. Jeremiah did not come at 6, as she had expected. The dinner hour passed, marked by the sound of guests in the dining room below and the smell of roasted meat drifting up through the floorboards. At 7, Willa heard a knock at the door and opened it to find Widow Hutchins with another tray. "Mr. Potter sent word he has been delayed," the widow said, her tone suggesting exactly what she thought of such delays. "He will call on you tomorrow morning at 9. "His mother?" Willa asked, concerned despite herself. "Doc Morrison says she will pull through, no thanks to that neglectful son of hers. He finally got the medicine she needed, but it was a near thing." The widow set the tray on the small table by the window. "You eat. Get some rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." But tomorrow came with complications Willa could not have anticipated. She woke to shouting in the street below, angry voices raised in argument. Pulling back the thin curtain, she saw a crowd gathered near the general store, and in the center of it, Jeremiah Potter stood facing Beckett Irving. Willa threw on her dress and veil, her fingers fumbling with the buttons in her haste, and hurried downstairs. By the time she reached the street, the argument had reached a fever pitch. "You had no right interfering yesterday," Jeremiah was saying, his face red with anger. "You made me look like a fool in front of the entire town." "You made yourself look like a fool," Beckett replied calmly. "I just pointed out what everyone already knew. Your mother was dying while you fussed over a mail-order bride. My relationship with my mother is none of your concern. And neither is my relationship with my intended wife." Jeremiah's hand shook as he pointed at Beckett. "I know what you are doing, Irving. Everyone knows about your reputation with women. But Miss Spencer is spoken for, contracted to me, and I will not have you sniffing around her like some kind of—" "Careful how you finish that sentence," Beckett said. And though his voice remained level, there was a threat underneath that made several onlookers step back. Willa pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding. "Gentlemen, please, this is unnecessary." Both men turned to look at her, and Willa saw several things in quick succession. The way Jeremiah's eyes darted away from her veiled face with something like revulsion, and the way Beckett's expression softened the moment he saw her. "Miss Spencer," Jeremiah said stiffly, "I apologize that our first proper meeting is occurring under such circumstances. If you would return to your room, I will call on you shortly, and we can discuss our arrangements in private." "Actually," Willa said, surprised by her own boldness, "I think this has already become quite public. Perhaps you should say whatever you need to say here and now." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "Very well. I have been thinking about our situation overnight, and I believe certain clarifications are necessary. When you arrive at my home as my wife, You will be expected to work in the store 6 days a week, manage the household, and care for my mother. In exchange, you will receive room and board and the respectability of marriage. There will be separate bedrooms, as I assume neither of us has expectations of a romantic nature given the circumstances. Willa heard gasps from the crowd, heard a woman whisper, "How cruel!" But she kept her attention fixed on Jeremiah. "I understood those terms when I accepted your proposal, Mr. Potter." "Good. Then we have an understanding." Jeremiah adjusted his spectacles. "The wedding will take place in 3 days after the banns are read. Reverend Thompson has agreed to perform a simple ceremony. No guests, no celebration, purely a legal formality." "Hold on," Beckett said, stepping forward. "You are talking about her like she is hired help, not a wife." "She is both," Jeremiah snapped. "And it is none of your business, Irving. Miss Spencer came here of her own free will, knowing full well what was expected." "Did she?" Beckett turned to Willa. "Did you know he was going to treat you like a servant, stick you in a separate room like you are something shameful to hide away?" "I knew there would be no romance," Willa said quietly. "That was made clear from the beginning. Romance is one thing, basic human dignity is another." Beckett's hands clenched at his sides. "Potter, you are a cold son of a bitch, you know that. And you are an interfering cowboy with delusions of heroism," Jeremiah shot back. "Miss Spencer is an adult woman capable of making her own decisions. If she chooses to honor her commitment to me, that is her right. And if you continue to interfere, I will have Sheriff Dawson arrest you for harassment." Sheriff Dawson, a stout man with a graying beard, stepped forward from the crowd. "Now hold on, Jeremiah. Beckett has not done anything illegal. He is just talking. He is disrupting my life and attempting to steal my intended bride," Jeremiah insisted. "I have not attempted to steal anything," Beckett said, his eyes finding Willa's through the veil. "I am just making sure the lady knows she has options." "What options?" Willa asked, and she heard the bitterness in her own voice. "I have no money, no skills beyond factory work and basic housekeeping, and a face that sends children screaming. What options do I have that are better than a loveless marriage to a cold man who at least offers me a roof and respectability?" The words hung in the air, raw and honest, and Willa saw Jeremiah flinch at her bluntness. But it was Beckett who spoke, his voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "You could have a husband who sees you as a partner, not a servant. You could have someone who does not care what is under that veil, who wants to know who you are inside, not just what you look like or what work you can do." "That is a fairy tale," Willa said, but her voice shook. "That does not exist for women like me." Beckett took a step closer and then another until he stood directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "It could, if you wanted it to." The crowd had gone absolutely silent, every person straining to hear what would come next. Willa felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind rushing past her ears, the ground far below. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I am saying that Potter is a fool who does not appreciate what he is getting. I am saying that you deserve better than a business arrangement with a man who sees you as convenient labor. I am saying—" Beckett paused and something flickered across his face, vulnerability mixing with determination. "I am saying you should come home with me instead." The crowd erupted. Jeremiah shouted in outrage. Sheriff Dawson tried to restore order, but Willa heard none of it. Her entire world narrowed to the man in front of her and the impossible thing he had just offered. "You do not know me," she said again, the same words she had spoken yesterday, but they felt different now, weighted with longing rather than resignation. "Then let me," Beckett said simply. "Let me know you." Let me show you that you are worth more than a cold bed and endless work for a man who cannot even look at you." "She is contracted to me," Jeremiah interrupted, pushing forward. "This is absurd. Miss Spencer, I demand you return to the hotel immediately and cease this ridiculous spectacle." Willa looked at Jeremiah, really looked at him for the first time. She saw a small man, both in body and spirit, someone who had answered her letter not because he wanted a wife, but because he needed someone he could control, someone who would be grateful for crumbs and never ask for more. She saw her future in his tight lips and dismissive eyes. Years of labor and loneliness, of being treated as less than human, of slow suffocation of whatever spirit she had left. Then she looked at Beckett and saw something entirely different. She saw risk and possibility and the terrifying prospect of hope. "I do not understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "Why would you do this? You do not know anything about me. I know you are brave enough to travel across half the state to start over. I know you survived something that killed 23 other women. I know you spoke up when Potter was talking about you like you were not even there. That is enough for now. The rest we can figure out together." "This is insane," Jeremiah sputtered. "She is scarred, Irving, hideously scarred. That is why she wears the veil. That is why she had to resort to answering matrimonial advertisements in the first place. Are you truly saying you want to saddle yourself with damaged goods out of some misplaced sense of chivalry?" Beckett's hand moved so fast Willa barely saw it, but suddenly Jeremiah was stumbling backward, one hand pressed to his mouth where blood welled from a split lip. The crowd gasped, and Sheriff Dawson moved forward, but Beckett held up a hand. "He insulted a lady," Beckett said calmly. "That is all the explanation you are getting." "Beckett," the sheriff warned, "I cannot let you go around hitting people even if they deserve it. It was one punch and he will live." Beckett's eyes never left Willa's face. "Now, Miss Spencer, I am asking you plain and clear, and I want an answer that is yours alone, not what you think you ought to say or what makes sense on paper. Do you want to honor this contract with Potter, knowing what your life will be? Or do you want to take a chance on something different?" Willa's mind raced. This was madness. She did not know this man, had met him less than 24 hours ago, had no guarantee he was not simply caught up in some romantic notion that would fade the moment he actually saw what lay beneath her veil. Every practical bone in her body screamed that she should stick with the known quantity, the signed contract, the safe if joyless future. But then she thought of Beckett's eyes when he looked at her, the way he had said she deserved better, the way he had offered her a choice when everyone else in her life had offered only obligations. "I would like to speak with Mr. Irving privately," Willa heard herself say. Jeremiah made a strangled sound of protest. "Absolutely not. That would be completely inappropriate." "I think we are well past appropriate," Sheriff Dawson said dryly. "Miss Spencer, you can use my office if you would like some privacy. It is just across the street." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice, and followed the sheriff toward a small building with barred windows and a wooden sign declaring it the town jail and sheriff's office. Beckett walked beside her, close but not touching, his presence both steadying and unnerving. Inside, the sheriff gestured to a small private room and then diplomatically disappeared, closing the door behind him. Willa stood in the middle of the sparse office, facing Beckett across a worn desk covered with papers and a coffee cup with a chipped handle. "All right," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Tell me why you really did this, and please do not insult my intelligence with pretty words about chivalry or destiny. I need the truth." Beckett leaned against the desk, crossing his arms over his chest. "Fair enough. The truth. I have been watching Potter court various women for the past 3 years, ever since his mother got sick, and he decided he needed a wife. Every one of them figured out what kind of man he was and left before the wedding. So he got craftier, started looking for women who would be grateful enough or desperate enough not to leave. That does not explain you, Willa pointed out. No, it does not. Beckett was quiet for a moment, and Willa could see him choosing his words carefully. The truth is, when I saw you step off that stage yesterday, all covered up and brave as hell despite being terrified, something in me just recognized something in you. I know how that sounds. I know it makes no sense. But I have learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I have says that letting you marry Potter would be the biggest mistake either of us could make. You do not even know what I look like, Willa said, her hand moving to the veil. Jeremiah was not lying about the scars. They are extensive and they are permanent. Most people cannot stand to look at me. Then most people are fools. Beckett straightened, taking a step closer. Can I ask you something, I suppose? Why do you think you are only worth what you can offer someone else? Why do you believe the fire made you less valuable as a person? The question hit Willa like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, realizing she had no good response. Because that was what she believed. Had believed ever since she had looked in a mirror for the first time after the bandages came off, and seen the twisted red flesh that now comprised half her face. She was damaged, broken, worth only what labor she could provide since no one would want her for anything else. I see, Beckett said softly, reading the answer in her silence. You have been told you are worthless so many times you started believing it. I am practical, Willa corrected, but the words lacked conviction. You are scared, which is reasonable given what you have been through. But Willa, can I call you Willa? She nodded, the informality feeling strange and intimate. Willa, I am not offering you charity. I am not trying to rescue you because I think you are helpless. I am offering you a partnership if you want it. Someone to build a life with, whatever that life looks like. I cannot promise it will be easy or that we will fall madly in love or any of that storybook nonsense. But I can promise you will be treated with respect and kindness, and that you will have a say in your own life. And if it does not work, Willa asked, if you decide you made a mistake, then we figure it out like adults, but Potter is not going to give you that option. Once you marry him, you will be stuck, contract or no contract. Divorce is messy and expensive and would leave you in an even worse position than you are now. Willa knew he was right. She had read the fine print in the matrimonial agency contract. Marriage meant Jeremiah would have legal control over everything, where she lived, what she did, even her ability to leave if things became unbearable. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. You mentioned coming home with you. To do what? Be your wife, your housekeeper. You're my wife, Beckett interrupted firmly. A real marriage if you are willing, not some cold business arrangement where you are treated like hired help, a partnership. You want to marry me? Willa stated it flatly, still struggling to believe this was real. I do. Even though you do not know what I look like under this veil. Even though I might be every bit as hideously scarred as Jeremiah suggested. Even though marrying me would bring no advantage to you whatsoever. Yes to all of those things. Beckett's voice was steady, certain. Though I disagree about advantages. A strong woman who knows her own mind. Someone brave enough to survive a fire and keep going. Someone willing to take a chance on a stranger because staying where she was meant giving up. Those seem like pretty significant advantages to me. Willa felt tears building behind her eyes, hot and unexpected. She could not remember the last time someone had spoken to her like she had value beyond her ability to work or her willingness to settle. This is crazy, she whispered. Probably, Beckett agreed. But the best things in life usually are. What do you say, Willa Spencer? You want to take a chance on crazy? Or you want to play it safe with Potter? Put that way, the choice was almost laughably simple. Safety with Jeremiah meant a living death, years of grinding loneliness and labor. Crazy with Beckett meant risk and uncertainty, but also possibility and the faint, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have something more. Willa took a deep breath, reached up and lifted her veil. The scars ran from her left temple down across her cheek and jaw, pulling the skin tight in places, leaving it puckered and discolored in others. Her left eye was slightly drooped from the damage, and the scarring continued down her neck, disappearing beneath the collar of her dress. She had stopped looking at herself in mirrors months ago, unable to bear the sight of what the fire had taken from her. She watched Beckett's face, waiting for the inevitable flinch, the flash of revulsion or pity that everyone showed when they saw her. But his expression did not change. He studied her face carefully, thoroughly, and then he smiled. "You have the most remarkable eyes," he said. "Gray-green, like the prairie after a storm. I could not tell through the veil, but I thought they might be something special. That is all you have to say." Willa asked, her voice cracking. "What do you want me to say? That the scars are there. They are. They are also irrelevant to whether or not I want to marry you." Beckett reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the scarred side of her face. His fingers were rough and warm, calloused from hard work, and Willa found herself leaning into the touch without meaning to. "How can you say they are irrelevant?" she asked. "Because they are not who you are. They are something that happened to you, something you survived. But they do not define you any more than this scar defines me." He traced the line on his own temple. "Got that when I was 16, breaking a wild horse. Could have died, did not. Now it is just part of my face." "It is not the same," Willa protested. "No," Beckett agreed. "Yours are worse, more visible. But the principle is the same. What happened to you is not all you are." Willa felt something crack open inside her chest, some tight knot of pain and shame she had been carrying since the fire. Tears spilled down her cheeks, tracking over scarred and unscarred skin alike, and she could not stop them. "Hey," Beckett said softly, pulling her into his arms. "Hey now, it is all right." "It is not," Willa sobbed into his chest. "Nothing has been all right for so long." "Then maybe it is time for that to change." Beckett held her carefully, like she was something precious rather than broken, and let her cry until she had no tears left. When Willa finally pulled back, embarrassed by her outburst, Beckett handed her a handkerchief and waited patiently while she composed herself. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not usually fall apart like that. Nothing to apologize for. You have been through more than most people could handle." Beckett tilted his head, studying her. "So, what is your answer?" Willa looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just a handsome cowboy but a man who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than anyone had in the past year. She thought about Jeremiah and his cold eyes and his business arrangement. She thought about the long, lonely years stretching ahead if she stayed the safe course. Then she thought about Beckett's offer, terrifying and tempting in equal measure. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will marry you." Beckett's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features, turning him from merely attractive to genuinely handsome. "Yeah, yes. Though I think we are both completely insane, probably." Beckett laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "But we will be insane together, which makes it better." Before Willa could respond, the office door burst open and Jeremiah stormed in, Sheriff Dawson trying unsuccessfully to hold him back. "I demand to know what is going on." Jeremiah sputtered, then stopped short when he saw Willa's unveiled face. His expression flickered through shock, disgust, and fury in rapid succession. "You have no right to be alone with my intended bride." "She is not your intended bride anymore," Beckett said calmly. She has agreed to marry me instead. That is impossible. We have a contract. Actually, Sheriff Dawson said from the doorway, those contracts are not legally binding until marriage. Miss Spencer is free to change her mind any time before the ceremony. Jeremiah's face went purple with rage. This is outrageous. I spent money bringing her here. I made arrangements. I turned down other applicants because she assured the agency she would honor her commitment. I am sorry for any inconvenience, Willa said, and meant it. However cold Jeremiah was, she had made promises she was now breaking. I will pay you back for the travel expenses as soon as I am able. Pay me back? With what money? You are destitute, which is the only reason you answered my advertisement in the first place. Jeremiah turned his fury on Beckett. And you have ruined everything. I needed a wife who would work, who would not have expectations or demands. Now I have to start this entire process over. Maybe you should try treating women like human beings instead of hired help, Beckett suggested. Might have better luck that way. Get out, Jeremiah snarled. Both of you, I do not want to see either of your faces again. That can be arranged, Beckett said, taking Willa's hand. Come on. Let us go get your things from the hotel and get out of this town. They left Jeremiah fuming in the sheriff's office and walked back across the street to the hotel, where Widow Hutchins was waiting with Willa's trunk already packed and ready. I heard what happened, the widow said, and there was something almost approving in her stern face. You made the right choice, girl. Potter would have worked you to death within 5 years. Thank you, Willa said, touched by the unexpected support. Do not thank me, just be happy. Lord knows there is little enough happiness in this world. The widow turned to Beckett. You hurt her, Irving, and I will shoot you myself. Understood, madam. Beckett loaded Willa's trunk onto his horse, a solid bay gelding with intelligent eyes, and then helped Willa up onto the saddle. She had expected to ride behind him, but instead he settled her in front, his arms coming around her to hold the reins, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. Ready? He asked, his breath warm against her ear. Willa looked back at Independence one last time, at the small town where she had expected to spend the rest of her life in loveless servitude. Then she looked ahead at the open prairie stretching to the horizon, wild and beautiful and full of possibility. Ready, she said. They rode north out of town, leaving the whispers and stares behind. The prairie was vast and golden in the afternoon light, rolling hills covered in tall grass that rippled in the wind like water. Willa had never seen anything so beautiful or so empty. After the crowded streets of St. Louis and the suffocating closeness of the factory, the open space felt like she could finally breathe again. It is 5 miles to the Double Bar I Ranch, Beckett said as they rode. That is where I work, where we will live. I am foreman there, which means I've got a small house separate from the bunkhouse where the other hands stay. It is not much, 2 rooms and a lean-to for cooking, but it is sturdy and the roof does not leak. It sounds wonderful, Willa said honestly. After expecting to share Jeremiah's house with his sick mother and sleep in a servant's quarters, having any space of her own felt like luxury. The owner is a man named Douglas Miller. Good man, fair, treats his workers right. He has got a wife, Catherine, and 3 young children. Catherine will probably want to meet you, might try to mother you a bit. She is like that with everyone. I do not mind. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Willa found herself relaxing into Beckett's arms, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warmth of the sun on her unveiled face. She had kept the veil stuffed in her pocket, not ready to burn it yet but no longer feeling the need to hide. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Anything. Why were you in town yesterday? You said you are the foreman at the ranch, which must keep you busy. What brought you to independence at that exact moment? Beckett was quiet for a beat too long, and Willa felt his arms tense slightly around her. The truth, always the truth. I heard Potter had sent for a mail-order bride and something about it bothered me. I have seen how he treats people, how he treats his mother. The thought of him having power over some desperate woman who did not know what she was getting into. I could not let it happen without at least seeing for myself. So you came to town specifically to interfere, Willa said, but there was no accusation in her voice, only wonder. I came to town specifically to make sure you knew what you were walking into. What happened after that was up to you. But you offered to marry me, Willa pointed out. That seems like more than just making sure I knew what I was getting into. Yeah, well, Beckett's voice held a note of embarrassment. That part was not planned. That was just me opening my mouth before my brain caught up. Do you regret it? Willa asked, her heart suddenly pounding. No. The answer came immediately, firmly. No, I do not regret it. Might be the smartest thing I have ever done, actually, or the dumbest. Time will tell. I am sorry for dragging you into my mess, Willa said softly. You did not drag me anywhere. I jumped in with both feet, eyes wide open. Beckett's arms tightened around her slightly. Besides, you are not a mess. You are just someone who has had some bad luck and needed a break. Nothing wrong with that. They crested a low hill, and suddenly the double bar I ranch spread out before them. It was bigger than Willa had expected. A sprawling collection of buildings centered around a large main house with a wide porch. She could see corrals with horses, a massive barn, several smaller outbuildings, and off to the side, separated by a line of cottonwood trees, a small but sturdy-looking cabin. That is ours, Beckett said, nodding toward the cabin. Home sweet home. As they approached, people emerged from various buildings, ranch hands and workers pausing in their tasks to watch the foreman return with an unexpected passenger. Willa saw curiosity on their faces, but also something else: respect for Beckett, clear in the way they nodded to him, the way they waited for his lead rather than rushing forward with questions. A man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and a kind face came out of the main house, a woman beside him wiping her hands on her apron. These had to be the Millers, the owners Beckett had mentioned. Beckett, Douglas Miller called out, his voice friendly but questioning. This is unexpected. I know, boss, and I apologize for the short notice. Beckett dismounted and helped Willa down, keeping a supportive hand on her elbow. This is Willa Spencer. We are getting married. The announcement caused a ripple of surprise through the assembled workers. Catherine Miller's eyebrows shot up, but her expression remained welcoming. Well, she said after a moment, that is news. Come inside, both of you, let us talk. Inside the main house, which was comfortable and lived in with toys scattered across the floor and the smell of bread baking, Catherine bustled around making coffee while Douglas settled into a chair across from where Beckett and Willa sat on a worn sofa. All right, Douglas said. I know you well enough to know you would not do something like this without good reason. What is going on? Beckett explained, laying out the situation with Potter, the contract Willa had signed, and his decision to offer an alternative. He was honest and straightforward, not trying to paint himself as a hero or make excuses for the impulsive nature of his proposal. When he finished, Douglas and Catherine exchanged a long look, one of those married couple communications that happened without words. Finally, Catherine turned to Willa. What do you want? She asked simply. I want a chance at a real life, Willa said, and heard how her voice shook. I want to be more than just convenient labor for a man who cannot even look at me. I want to be seen, Catherine finished gently. To matter. Yes, Willa whispered. Catherine reached over and took Willa's hand, her grip warm and firm. Then you have come to the right place. Beckett is a good man, one of the best I know. A bit impulsive sometimes, she shot Beckett a pointed look, but his heart is in the right place. If he says he will treat you right, he will. I just do not want to be a burden, Willa said. I can work. I am strong and I am not afraid of hard labor. I will earn my keep. This is not about earning your keep, Douglas said firmly. If Beckett says you are his wife, then you are family. Family does not have to earn their place. The words hit Willa like a blow, unexpected kindness after so many months of being treated as disposable. She felt tears threatening again and blinked them back, refusing to fall apart twice in one day. Thank you, she managed. When is the wedding? Catherine asked. Tomorrow, Beckett said. If that works, I figure the sooner the better before Potter tries to make trouble. Potter already got his split lip, Douglas pointed out. He is probably smart enough not to push further. Maybe, but I would rather not take chances. Tomorrow it is, then. Catherine stood, already shifting into planning mode. We will have it here, just family and the hands. Nothing fancy, but we will make it nice. Willa, come with me. You need a proper dress. Before Willa could protest, Catherine had whisked her upstairs to a bedroom where a large wardrobe stood against one wall. The older woman began pulling out dresses, holding them up against Willa and discarding them when they did not fit right. You are taller than me, Catherine muttered. But Sarah Miller, that is Douglas's sister, lives in Kansas City. She left some things here last time she visited. She is about your height. Catherine dove back into the wardrobe and emerged triumphant with a dress in a soft blue fabric that looked almost new. I cannot, Willa started. Of course you can. Sarah will never miss it, and you need something nice for your wedding. Catherine's voice softened. Every bride deserves to feel special on her wedding day, Willa, even if it is a rushed affair with a man you just met. You must think I am insane, Willa said quietly. I think you are brave, and I think Beckett surprised himself today, which is always entertaining. Catherine helped Willa into the dress, which fit remarkably well. He has been alone a long time, that one. Married to the ranch, we always said. But I always thought when he finally found someone, it would be sudden like this. He is not the slow courtship type. What if this is a mistake? Willa asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. What if we both realize we have made a terrible error? Then you figure it out, same as any married couple. Marriage is not about never making mistakes. It is about choosing to work through them together. Catherine adjusted the dress sleeves. There, you look beautiful. Willa turned to look in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The blue dress brought out the gray-green of her eyes, and her dark hair, freed from its usual tight bun, fell in waves around her shoulders. The scars were still there, stark against her pale skin, but somehow in this moment they seemed less important, just part of her face rather than the defining feature. I do not know how to thank you, Willa said. Be good to Beckett. That is thanks enough. He deserves someone who sees what a good man he is. Catherine smiled. Now, let us go show him what his future bride looks like in a proper dress. When they came back downstairs, Willa found Beckett sitting on the porch with Douglas, both men nursing cups of coffee and talking in low voices. They looked up as the women emerged, and Willa watched Beckett's expression shift from casual to stunned. Well, Catherine said, clearly pleased with herself. What do you think? I think I am marrying the most beautiful woman in Missouri, Beckett said. And the way he said it, looking directly at Willa's scarred face with nothing but admiration in his eyes, made her believe he meant it. That night, Willa slept in a guest room in the main house, Catherine having declared it improper for them to share the cabin before the wedding. Willa lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had gotten herself into. 24 hours ago, she had been prepared to marry a man who saw her as convenient labor. Now she was about to marry a cowboy who looked at her like she was precious. The wedding took place the next afternoon under the cottonwood trees near Beckett's cabin. Reverend Thompson, looking somewhat bemused by the rushed nature of the proceedings but willing to help, performed a simple ceremony. The ranch hands attended, along with Douglas and Catherine Miller and their 3 children. It was small and quick, but there was genuine warmth in it, people smiling and offering congratulations like they meant it. Willa wore the blue dress and her hair loose, no veil to hide behind. She spoke her vows in a voice that only shook slightly, looking into Beckett's storm-colored eyes and promising things she hoped she could deliver to honor him, to stand by him, to build a life together. When Beckett said, "I do," his voice was firm and clear, no hesitation or doubt. He slipped a simple gold band on her finger, something he had borrowed from Catherine with promises to get a proper ring later, and then the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thompson said. Beckett hesitated, his eyes asking permission, and Willa nodded. He kissed her gently, carefully, like she might break, and Willa felt something warm unfurl in her chest, the first stirring of something that might become love given time and nurturing. The ranch hands cheered, and Catherine produced a cake she had somehow managed to bake in a few hours, and for a while, it was almost like a real wedding celebration. Willa stood beside her new husband, accepted congratulations from people she had just met, and felt the strangeness of her new reality settling over her like a blanket. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange, the celebration wound down. The hands returned to their duties or the bunkhouse, the Millers herded their tired children back to the main house, and suddenly Willa and Beckett were alone, standing outside the cabin that was now their home. "Well," Beckett said, shoving his hands in his pockets, "this is it." "This is it," Willa agreed. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the reality of what they had done settling between them. They were married now, bound by law and custom, 2 strangers who had made wild promises to each other based on instinct and desperation, and something neither could quite name. "Look," Beckett said finally, "I know this is strange. I know we do not really know each other. So I just want to be clear there is no pressure for anything tonight, or any night until you are ready. The cabin has got 2 rooms. You can have your own space for as long as you need." Willa felt a rush of gratitude and something else, something warmer. "Thank you. I'm in it, Willa. This marriage is whatever we make it. We will figure it out together at whatever pace feels right." "Okay," Willa said softly. "Okay." They went inside together and Beckett showed her around the small cabin. It was simple but well-maintained, with a main room containing a table, chairs, and a stone fireplace, and 2 smaller rooms off to the side, one with a bed and dresser, the other currently used for storage but big enough for another bed. "I will clear out that room for you," Beckett said. "Get a proper bed set up and everything. Might take a day or 2, but—" "Beckett," Willa interrupted, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you want separate rooms, or is that just what you think I want?" Beckett studied her carefully. "What do you want?" Willa thought about it, really thought about it. "I want to try being married, really married, not some business arrangement with separate lives under the same roof. That is what I was running away from, remember? Being married takes time," Beckett said carefully. "We cannot force feelings that are not there yet. No, but we can give them a chance to grow." Willa stepped closer to him, her heart pounding but her decision made. "I am not saying I am ready for everything right now. But I do not want to start this marriage by treating you like a stranger I am afraid of. You have been nothing but kind to me. You deserve better than that." Beckett reached out slowly and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the borrowed ring on her finger. "You are something else, Willa Irving. The name startled her. Willa Irving, not Spencer anymore. She had a new name, a new life, a new chance. "So are you, Beckett Irving." That first night they shared the bed but nothing more, lying side by side in the darkness and talking until sleep claimed them. Beckett told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 15, about working his way north through various ranches, until he found the double-bar eye and a boss who treated him fair. Willa told him about St. Louis, about the factory and the fire, about the months of recovery and the slow realization that her old life was gone forever. They talked about small things too, favorite foods and childhood memories and dreams for the future. And when Willa finally drifted off, it was with Beckett's hand loosely clasping hers and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice after all. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Willa woke each morning to the sound of Beckett moving around the cabin, getting ready for the day's work. She would rise and make breakfast, simple fare of eggs and bacon and biscuits, and they would eat together before Beckett headed out to manage the ranch hands and Willa set about turning the cabin into a proper home. Catherine Miller proved to be a blessing, stopping by regularly with advice and supplies, and a willingness to answer questions without making Willa feel foolish for asking. Through Catherine, Willa met the other women connected to the ranch, the cook's wife, the wives of several ranch hands who lived in small houses on the property, and even Douglas's sister Sarah when she came to visit and laughingly told Willa to keep the blue dress. But it was the evenings that Willa came to treasure most, when Beckett returned tired and dusty from the day's work, and they would sit together on the small porch, watching the sun set over the prairie. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other in slow increments, building something fragile and precious one conversation at a time. 3 weeks after the wedding, Willa was hanging laundry when a rider approached the cabin. She tensed when she recognized Jeremiah Potter, her first instinct to run inside and hide. But she was Willa Irving now, not the desperate woman who had stepped off the stagecoach. She straightened her shoulders and waited. Jeremiah dismounted, looking uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous in his city clothes among the ranch setting. "Miss Spencer," he said stiffly. "Mrs. Irving," Willa corrected gently. "Yes, of course." Jeremiah removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I came to apologize." Willa blinked in surprise. "I am sorry. I was angry when you broke our agreement. Felt like I had been cheated, like you had led me on. But the truth is, I was not looking for a wife. I was looking for free labor and someone to care for my mother. You deserved better than that." "Thank you," Willa said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot. My mother pointed out that a woman who would marry a stranger out of desperation probably would not have been very happy with me anyway. She said I needed to figure out what I really want before I try again." Jeremiah looked up at Willa. "She also said I should be a better son. She was right about that too." "How is she doing?" Willa asked. "Better. The medicine helped and I have been spending more time with her. Hired a girl from town to help in the store so I can be home more often." Jeremiah smiled slightly. "Turns out when you actually pay attention to your mother, she is quite good company." "I am glad," Willa said and meant it. "And you are happy here." Willa looked around at the cabin, at the prairie stretching to the horizon, at the laundry flapping in the breeze. "Yes," she said simply. "I am happy here." Jeremiah nodded, put his hat back on, and mounted his horse. "Good. That is good. I am glad one of us got what we needed." He rode away without looking back, and Willa watched him go with a sense of closure she had not known she needed. That night when Beckett came home and she told him about Jeremiah's visit, he was quiet for a long moment. "You have any regrets?" he asked finally. "About what? About not marrying Potter, about choosing me instead, about any of this?" Willa turned to look at him, this man who had stepped into her life like a bolt of lightning, unexpected and transformative. In the fading light, she could see the worry in his eyes, the vulnerability he tried to hide. "No," she said firmly. "No regrets at all." Something in Beckett's expression shifted, softened. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her scarred cheek. "Good," he said quietly. "Because I have been falling in love with you, Willa Irving, and it would be inconvenient if you were planning to leave." Willa's breath caught in her throat. "You love me." "I am getting there," Beckett said. "Every day a little bit more. The way you hum when you are cooking. The way you stand up to the ranch hands when they try to tease you. The way you look at the prairie like it is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen." He cupped her face gently in both hands. "The way you are brave even when you are scared. Yeah, I am definitely getting there." "I think I am too," Willa whispered, "falling in love with you." "Yeah." Beckett's smile was slow and warm. "Yeah." He kissed her then, and it was different from the careful kiss at their wedding. This was deeper, more certain, a promise of things to come. When they finally pulled apart, Willa was breathless and Beckett's eyes were dark with want. "We should probably go inside," he said, his voice rough. "Probably," Willa agreed. They went inside, closing the door on the prairie night, and began the next chapter of their marriage. One that involved less talking and more showing each other how they felt with touches and whispers, and the kind of intimacy that only came from trust and growing affection. The seasons changed, summer giving way to fall with its cooler temperatures and golden light. Willa learned the rhythms of ranch life, the busy times of year and the quieter periods, the constant work of maintaining a household in a place where nothing came easy. She learned to cook over the fireplace, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes and manage the 100 small tasks that kept a home running. But more than that, she learned what it meant to be part of a community. The ranch was like a small village, everyone depending on each other, and Willa found herself drawn into that web of relationships. She helped Catherine with the children, traded recipes with the other wives, even learned to ride well enough to occasionally accompany Beckett when he checked fence lines or moved cattle. The town of Independence remained wary of her at first, gossip spreading about the veiled bride who had jilted poor Jeremiah Potter for a rough cowboy. But gradually, as people saw her around town with Beckett, saw how he looked at her and how she smiled at him, the gossip softened into acceptance. Some people would always stare at her scars, but Willa found she cared less and less what strangers thought. She had a husband who loved her, friends who valued her, and a place she belonged. Winter came hard that year, with storms that buried the ranch in snow and temperatures that dropped so low the water in the basin froze solid. Willa and Beckett spent long evenings huddled by the fire, wrapped in blankets and each other, talking and reading aloud from the few books they owned and simply enjoying the quiet comfort of being together. It was during one of those long winter nights that Willa realized she had not bled in nearly 2 months. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, afraid that speaking it aloud might somehow make it untrue. But as January turned to February, and her body began to change in small but unmistakable ways, she could no longer deny the truth. She was carrying Beckett's child. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never thought she would have children, had assumed her scars and her desperation meant that particular dream was lost. But here she was, married to a good man who loved her, carrying new life inside her body. And suddenly, the future looked entirely different than anything she had imagined. She told Beckett on a clear February morning when the sun turned the snow-covered prairie into a field of diamonds. They were sitting at the table, eating breakfast, and Willa just blurted it out. "I am pregnant." Beckett froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "You are what? Pregnant?" "With child, going to have a baby." Willa twisted her hands together. I am fairly certain. I have missed 2 courses and I am sick in the mornings and my clothes are getting tight." And Beckett set down his cup very carefully, stood up, walked around the table and pulled Willa into his arms. "We are having a baby," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Are you happy?" Willa asked, her face pressed against his chest. "Happy? Willa, I am." He pulled back to look at her face and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm so happy I cannot even find words for it. Really, really." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was difficult at times. Willa was sick more often than not through the first months, and the summer heat made everything worse. But Beckett was endlessly patient, holding her hair when she was ill, bringing her water and crackers, never complaining when she was too tired or uncomfortable to do much beyond the basic necessities. Catherine became an invaluable source of advice and support, having been through 3 pregnancies herself. She showed Willa how to make clothes for the baby, taught her what to expect during labor, and generally kept her from panicking about the rapidly approaching reality of motherhood. Willa's body changed dramatically as the baby grew. Her belly swelled, her face filled out, and the scars that had once dominated her appearance became just one feature among many. When she looked in the mirror now, she saw not just the damaged skin, but also the glow of pregnancy, the softness in her eyes, the smile that came more easily than it had in years. "You are beautiful," Beckett would tell her, his hand resting on her belly to feel the baby kick. "I am huge," Willa would reply, but without real complaint. She felt huge and awkward and ungainly, but she also felt alive and hopeful and more herself than she had since before the fire. The baby came in late September, on a cool evening when the prairie grasses had turned gold and the air smelled of coming autumn. The labor was long and difficult, Catherine and the ranch doctor attending while Beckett paced outside, unable to help and hating every moment of Willa's pain. But finally, just as dawn was breaking over the prairie, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Willa lay exhausted and sweat-soaked, and Catherine placed a small, wriggling bundle in her arms. "A boy," Catherine said, smiling. "A healthy baby boy." Willa looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt love crash over her like a wave. He was perfect. He was theirs. He was a future she had never dared to dream of. Beckett came in then, looking pale and terrified, and Catherine wisely excused herself to give the new family privacy. Beckett approached the bed slowly, as if afraid he might break something, and looked down at his son with wonder in his eyes. "He is so small," Beckett whispered. "He is perfect," Willa said. "Can I hold him?" Willa carefully transferred the baby to Beckett's arms, showing him how to support the tiny head, and watched as her husband's face transformed with love and awe. The big, rough cowboy who could break horses and work from dawn to dusk looked utterly undone by the small bundle in his arms. "Hey there, little one," Beckett murmured. "I am your papa. Welcome to the world." The baby opened his eyes, gray-green like Willa's, and seemed to study his father's face. Beckett laughed, the sound choked with emotion, and looked at Willa with tears streaming down his face. "We made this," he said. "You and me, we made a whole person." "We did," Willa agreed, her own tears falling freely. They named him Benjamin Irving after Beckett's father. Little Benjamin was a good baby, more content than fussy, and he quickly became the center of their world. Willa had worried that she would not know how to be a mother, that she would somehow fail at this most fundamental task, but she found that love made up for a lot of uncertainty. She learned to read Benjamin's different cries, to soothe him when he was upset, to marvel at each tiny milestone. Beckett was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son, talking to him like he could understand every word, showing him the prairie and the horses, and teaching him about the world he had been born into. Watching them together, Willa's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. The first year of Benjamin's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and first smiles, first teeth, and first words. The cabin that had seemed adequate for 2 adults felt cramped with a baby's needs, so Beckett and some of the ranch hands built an addition, adding another room and expanding the living space. Douglas Miller gave them a raise in recognition of Beckett's years of loyal service and his growing family. And suddenly life felt stable and secure in a way Willa had never experienced. On their second wedding anniversary, Beckett surprised Willa with a gift, a gold locket engraved with their initials and containing a tiny photograph of Benjamin. It was the most expensive thing anyone had ever given her, and when she tried to protest the cost, Beckett silenced her with a kiss. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I did not," Willa protested. "You saved mine, remember. I am the one who was desperate and alone." "No," Beckett said firmly. "I was existing, not living, working dawn to dusk, going through the motions, never really connecting with anyone. Then you stepped off that stagecoach, all covered up and terrified and brave as hell, and something in me just woke up. You made me want more, want better, want a real life with someone, not just endless work until I died. So yeah, you saved my life. This locket is the least I can do." Willa wore the locket every day, a tangible reminder of how far she had come from the desperate woman who had answered a matrimonial advertisement. Sometimes, when she was doing dishes or hanging laundry or rocking Benjamin to sleep, she would touch the locket and remember that first day in independence, remember the veil and the whispers and the cold dread in her stomach. Then she would look at her life now, at her husband who loved her, at her healthy son, at the home they had built together, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude that Beckett Irving had been in independence that day, that he had looked at her veiled figure and decided to interfere. When Benjamin was 18 months old, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only excitement, and Beckett greeted the news by lifting her off her feet and spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "Another baby," he said, his grin wide and infectious. "Another baby," Willa agreed. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Willa knew what to expect, perhaps because she was no longer afraid. She felt grounded and secure in a way she never had before, confident in her marriage and her role as a mother. The baby came in early summer, another long labor that ended with Catherine placing a small bundle in Willa's arms. "A girl," she announced. "A beautiful baby girl." Beckett had been hoping for a daughter, though he would have been thrilled with another son. When he saw his little girl for the first time, his eyes went suspiciously bright, and he had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. "She looks just like you," he said to Willa, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Poor thing," Willa said, but without bitterness. She had made peace with her scars long ago, had learned to see them as proof of survival rather than evidence of ruin. "No," Beckett said seriously. "Lucky thing. She is going to be as beautiful and brave and strong as her mother." They named her Rose, partly because Willa loved roses and partly because she had been born in June when wild roses bloomed across the prairie. Rose was a fussier baby than Benjamin had been, more demanding and particular, but Willa loved her fierce little daughter with the same overwhelming intensity she loved her son. Benjamin, now a toddler with opinions about everything, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would bring her his favorite toys, and pat her head with all the gentleness his small hands could manage, saying, "My baby," with fierce pride. Life settled into a new rhythm, the chaos of two small children filling the cabin with noise and laughter and occasional tears. Willa and Beckett navigated parenthood together, learning as they went, making mistakes and celebrating victories, and simply showing up for each other every day. The years passed, marked by children's milestones and ranch life, and the slow deepening of love that came from building a life together. Benjamin grew tall and dark like his father, with Willa's eyes and a quiet thoughtfulness that made him seem older than his years. Rose inherited Beckett's quick smile and Willa's determination, a fierce little girl who was afraid of nothing. When Benjamin was 5 and Rose was 3, Willa found herself pregnant again, though this time she waited until she was certain before telling Beckett. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set as they had done thousands of times before, when she took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Again?" Beckett asked, understanding immediately. "Again," Willa confirmed. This time the baby came easily, a boy they named William who was calm and content from his first breath. Benjamin was thrilled to have a brother, someone he could teach and look after, while Rose seemed mildly offended that the new baby took attention away from her. 3 children meant the cabin was truly bursting at the seams. Douglas Miller, in recognition of Beckett's decade of service and his loyalty to the ranch, offered them a larger house on the property, one that had been standing empty since the previous foreman retired. It was bigger than the cabin, with 4 bedrooms and a proper kitchen, and Willa cried when she saw it. "It is too much," she protested. "It is not enough," Douglas replied. "You and Beckett are family. This ranch is as much yours as it is mine in all the ways that matter. Take the house. Raise your children. Be happy." They moved into the new house when William was 6 months old, and Willa spent weeks making it feel like home, hanging curtains and arranging furniture and slowly filling the rooms with the accumulation of their life together. The cabin became storage, a place to keep tools and supplies, though sometimes Willa would go there and remember those early days when it had been just her and Beckett, learning to be married, learning to love each other. No regrets. Beckett asked one night as they got ready for bed in their new house, the sounds of sleeping children drifting from the other rooms. It had become their question to each other over the years, a check-in to make sure they were both still happy with the choice they had made. "No regrets," Willa said, as she always did. "You?" "Not a single one," Beckett replied, pulling her into his arms. "Best decision I ever made, offering to bring you home with me." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Willa said and kissed him. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep contentment. Benjamin grew into a serious young man who loved working with the horses. Rose became a whirlwind of energy and opinions, challenging everyone around her and refusing to be constrained by what girls were supposed to do. William was the peacemaker, the one who could smooth over conflicts between his siblings and always seemed to know when someone needed comfort. Willa watched her children grow and marveled at the life she had built. Sometimes she would remember that day in Independence, standing in the street in her veil while townspeople whispered and Jeremiah Potter looked at her with cold calculation. She would remember the despair she had felt, the bone-deep certainty that her life was over in any way that mattered. Then she would look around at her home, at her husband and children, at the community she belonged to, and feel staggered by how wrong she had been. Her life had not ended with the fire that scarred her. It had been waiting for her to find it, here on the prairie with a cowboy who had whispered, "You are coming home with me." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Beckett took Willa on a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with Catherine Miller. They rode out to a spot he had discovered years ago, a high point on the prairie where you could see for miles in every direction, nothing but rolling grassland and endless sky. "This is where I came the day after I met you," Beckett said as they sat together watching the sunset. "I needed to think about what I had done, figure out if I was crazy or inspired or both." "What did you decide?" Willa asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That I was definitely crazy, but that sometimes crazy is exactly what you need." Beckett turned to look at her, his storm-colored eyes soft with love. "I have been happy every day since then, Willa. Even the hard days, even when we are exhausted and the children are sick and everything feels like too much. I am still happy because I am doing it with you." "I love you," Willa said simply, because sometimes that was all that needed to be said. "I love you too," Beckett replied, and kissed her as the sun painted the prairie gold and orange and red, colors as vivid as their love and as lasting as the land itself. Years later, when Benjamin brought home a girl he was courting and asked for his parents' blessing to marry her, Willa and Beckett exchanged a long look across the dinner table. "How long have you known each other?" Willa asked. 3 months, Benjamin admitted, looking nervous. 3 months is not very long, Beckett pointed out. "I know Pa, but I know she is the one. I knew pretty much from the moment I met her." Benjamin's eyes moved between his parents. "Kind of like you two, right? You married Ma after knowing her just a few days." Willa laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "That is true, though I would not recommend it as a general strategy." "But it worked for you," Benjamin pressed. "You are happy, right? You do not regret marrying so fast." "No regrets," Beckett and Willa said together, then smiled at each other. "Then give me your blessing," Benjamin said. "Please." They gave it, of course, recognizing their own story in their son's impulsive certainty. They attended his wedding and watched him start his own family, saw their grandchildren born and grow, and felt the satisfaction of a life well lived. Rose never married, choosing instead to run her own horse breeding operation, and Willa defended her daughter's choice fiercely against anyone who suggested a woman needed a husband to be complete. William became a teacher, finding fulfillment in educating ranch children in a small schoolhouse built specifically for that purpose. As Willa and Beckett grew older, their hair graying and their bodies moving slower, they remained deeply connected, still sitting together on the porch each evening, still checking in with each other, still choosing their marriage every day. "No regrets?" Beckett would ask. "No regrets," Willa would reply. And it was true. Despite the hardships, despite the challenges, despite everything life had thrown at them, Willa Spencer, who became Willa Irving, had never regretted the moment she looked at a cowboy who saw past her veil and said yes to a different future. She had boarded a stagecoach as a veiled bride nobody wanted, desperate and alone, and convinced her life was effectively over. She had stepped off that stagecoach into judgment and whispers, into a future that looked bleak and cold. Then a cowboy with storm-colored eyes had whispered, "You are coming home with me," and everything had changed. That home had become more than just a place. It had become a life, a family, a love story that spanned decades. It had become everything Willa never knew she could have, given to her by a man who saw her value when everyone else saw only her scars. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Willa looked at her husband across the crowded room. Beckett caught her eye and smiled, that same smile that had first made her heart skip, now etched in a face lined with age and joy and years of laughter. "No regrets," he mouthed across the room. "No regrets," she mouthed back, touching the gold locket that still hung around her neck after all these years. And as the celebration continued around them, As family filled their home with noise and love and life, Willa thought about that desperate woman in the veil and sent her a silent message across the years. Hold on. Help is coming. In the form of a cowboy who will see you for who you really are, who will offer you not just a home but a future, who will love you not despite your scars but including them as part of the remarkable woman you are. Hold on, because your story is not ending. It is just beginning. And what a beautiful story it would be.